What an incredible week in the world of Australian immigration. Australia is heading for the biggest migration shake-up for generations. I'm Karl Konrad and this is Australian Immigration News, and hang on to your seats for the roller coaster ride of announcements. First, we had the amazing news of New Zealanders gaining easy access to Australian citizenship, and then the Migration Review was released with a heart-stopping speech by the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill. Now let's start with the Migration Review news. In the early 1950s, we had the populate or perish approach by the then PM Ben Chifley, and now it's the skill up or sink reality of the Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill in her speech on Thursday at the National Press Club.
If populate or perish described Australia's challenge in the 1950s, skill up or sink is the reality that we face in the 2020s and beyond.
Tonight we shall cover just the basics of her speech and the key points of interest in the review report released on Thursday. This report has 38 major recommendations. Now I'll have plenty to say on my analysis of its contents next week when we delve into the nitty-gritty of them. So today I'll just bite my tongue, which is hard for me to do, and just give you a rundown of the most interesting facts being laid out in the review paper. First up, and the decisions which have already been made. The TSMT is to be increased to 70,000 from the 1st of July. And do not worry, this will not affect those who have been granted their 491 and 482 visas, only those who have these visas granted after the 1st of July. Nothing new or unexpected there, and in fact it was a relief that it was not higher since the unions were demanding it. And finally, the 482 TSS short-term visa holders will be able to access permanent residency by the end of this year, most likely through the existing 186 employer nomination scheme. So far these are the only two recommendations adopted, but no doubt there will be more after discussions are held with the public. Now let's have a look at the rest of the highlights which have not been decided upon by the government just yet. The first, and it's a big one, the recalibration of the points test.
But the current test is not working properly. The bar is set too low, and today the points test rewards persistence, not the skills we need for Australia's future.
They are going to have a bias to select applicants with high human capital. We are going to make a separate video this week on what we can expect in this recalibration process based upon the report and our 24 years experience. One thing is for sure, the government will be trying to break the dominance of former international students using this test to gain residency. So unfortunately, not great news ahead for many people out there in Australia. Surprisingly, the Global Talent Visa will be expanded. No need for a nomination is recommended, and even an enlarged program to send public servants out into the world looking for exceptional talents and advertising what Australia has to offer.
Australia needs to enter the competition for global talent. We need to make a big switch in our thinking, from the passivity that drives the system today to active engagement with the people we think can help build our country's future. We propose creating a new area in the Home Affairs Department, which will work with the new Jobs and Skills Australia body that has been established by our government to help identify skills needs in Australia's economy. And under this proposal, we would go out into the world and find the migrants that Australia needs and talk to them about joining us in our national journey.
It is also recommended that the migration program should be based upon a net overseas migration figure which accounts for both temporary and permanent residency rather than rely on permanent migration caps. This will mean caps on the temporary working visas, whereas now there are none. There has been a great deal of reporting in the media lately of this 650,000 figure of temporary residents entering Australia over the next 2 years, and it has freaked out much of the Australian community, particularly when there is a rental crisis happening at the same time. Limit and revise the 188 visas and perhaps not scrap them altogether. Remove the labour market testing requirements for employer-sponsored visas, and I'm surprised they haven't announced this already, but no doubt they have to appear to consult the unions first before they do so. A new 3-tier system of assessment for temporary worker visas. An easier pathway for high-income workers, probably those above the high-income threshold, working in sectors the government is looking for. Second is a mid-level cohort that is above the new TSMT but below the high-income threshold. And thirdly, a lower wages cohort for sectors experiencing shortages such as farm workers and aged care support workers. A recommendation to allow temporary migrant workers to move from their current employment and find another employment in the same sector, and give them 6 months to find a new one instead of the current usual 2 months. Make it easier for employers to be able to sponsor a worker by reducing red tape. Consider limiting working holiday visas to 1 year only. Raise the requirements for student visas to ensure at the end of their courses they have a higher chance of employment. The fees paid by employers for sponsorship approval are to be paid on an instalment package rather than the upfront as currently required. Introduce a parent visa lottery scheme to prevent further visa backlogs. Yes, this is me biting my tongue. Reduce the expensive temporary resident parent visa fees to make this more accessible, and possibly move to replace permanent residency with temporary resident status for parents. Provide the 485 graduate visa automatically upon course completion for international students. Vary the length of the 485 visas depending upon the courses studied and the occupations in demand. In fact, this has already happened with the new 5-year 485 visas offered to students who complete particular programs. Give direct permanent residency option to graduates in very narrow, high-demand sectors, perhaps such as medical professionals and teachers. Require 485 and student visa applicants to demonstrate a higher English level, most probably competent English. Replace the GTE requirements for student visa applications with a new genuine student test. Probably much of the same thing in the long run.
We are incredibly privileged in Australia to train many young people in our brilliant universities and colleges. Those students are meant to come here to study.
Closer monitoring of temporary workers through the TFN tax system and the single-touch payroll requirements. Look out, they'll be watching every penny you earn. So overall, it's great news for the New Zealand citizens out there, and also the 482 visa holders in the short-term stream. However, there will be great concerns for former international students looking to the points test to gain a visa. Much more on this issue during the week, so stay tuned for a midweek video. Well, that's all for an explosive edition. It's taken a lot of energy to get this to you as soon as possible, but that's our commitment to be the #1 place to get the experienced perspective of what happens in the world of Australian immigration. The other big news this week was hard to miss, about New Zealanders being able to apply for Australian citizenship without the need to become a permanent resident first.
From July 1, Kiwis who have made the long-term move to Australia can apply for citizenship. They don't need to become permanent residents first, but they do need to have lived here for 4 years. The change means they can vote, work in the public service, receive study loans and government benefits.
The Australian and New Zealand news programs were rapidly spreading the good news, as Nine did.
Well, more certainty, less heartbreak for Kiwis living in Australia. That's the hope after the federal government today announced a direct pathway to citizenship.
And Channel 1 News in New Zealand.
Very fantastic and very, very welcome. That's the response from long-term Australia-based Kiwis to a deal that'll see more than 500,000 of them able to become true blue Aussies.
New Zealanders will be able to apply for Australian citizenship from the 1st of July by simply meeting the current residency requirements, but instead of needing to be Australian permanent residents for 12 months as they need to be now, they only need to be living in Australia on the 444 temporary residency visa for 4 years. Children born in Australia from July 2022 to New Zealand citizens will be citizens by birth when the law changes on the 1st of July this year. These changes are designed to give certainty to New Zealanders and, of course, the most important thing of all, be able to call Australia their home. The ABC highlighted the feelings of one New Zealand family here.
Despite raising their family here for more than a decade, Kiwis Tony and Rob still don't feel like they quite belong.
We definitely just felt, like we were just permanently living here temporarily.
Back in 1973, Australia and New Zealand entered into the Tasman Agreement, meaning New Zealanders gain PR after moving here and vice versa. However, the attitude of the Australian government started to change as more and more New Zealanders came to Australia looking for work, compared to Australians moving to New Zealand. The financial strain on the system was beginning to get too much. The New Zealand government became complicit with a plan to stop the brain drain to Australia, and the best way they thought to do this was to cut off New Zealanders from Australian social security benefits. So in 2001, John Howard and New Zealand's PM collaborated to change the law in Australia to put New Zealanders onto the indefinite temporary residency visa instead.
And we do believe it is a win-win for both countries. It is a win-win understanding.
Well, did this slow them down? No, it did not. The lure of earning more money here was just too much to resist.
Time your kangaroo down.
But would you really want to live there? Our average wage is $77,000. In Australia, it's $25k more. A nurse here is paid $72k compared to $96k over there. A teacher makes $32k more. A builder gets $39k more, while a chef can cook up an extra $16,000 across the ditch.
But since there are so many New Zealanders already here, some figures say as much as 750,000 in fact, and a large number of them have been here more than 4 years, one has to wonder how the citizenship section will cope. Even recently, a citizenship process takes about 1 year to complete, and what are the waiting times going to blow out to? Across New Zealand, this news of granting citizenship did not seem to go down too well.
Are they just trying to steal our professionals?
Well, that's certainly the suspicion. Look, Australia is looking at skill shortages as well. They're looking worldwide, and New Zealand is easy pickings. New Zealanders fit in better than anybody else into the Australian workforce, into the Australian society. They're willing to travel across. And so consequently, Australia is, as we read in the papers, deliberately targeting certain employment categories in the medical profession, for example. And they're getting a good response.
There was even the suggestion that perhaps New Zealand again should be part of Australia.
Welcome, Mark. What do you make of this story?
Well, I mean, it sounds like this is not going to work in our favour, but there is a very, very easy solution. We become part of Australia again. We were part of New South Wales until 1841, and I remember life was quite comfortable back then.
Yeah, there was absolutely nothing hectic going on around there at all.
Well, I guess Australians has a nice ring to it. But what a sneaky move by the Labor government. Why give them access to citizenship straight away, you ask? Well, isn't it obvious? Because when the next election comes around, there are going to be nearly 1 million more people who can vote, and they will all remember what the Labor government did for them. Very smart indeed. Remember, if you need that experienced professional advice that you won't find on the Immigration Department's website, and you will only find in a business with over 24 years of experience in the industry, we are always here to help. So as always, take care out there, and I'll see you next time. So bye for now.